imply, imply, imply. Let's talk about the word imply. So, the part of speech for imply is actually a verb, which means it's an action word that tells us what's happening in a sentence. In common usage, when we say someone implies something, it usually means they're suggesting or hinting at something without directly saying it. For example, if your friend says, "The city was very quiet today," you might imply that there was some sort of event or celebration that happened last night by adding, "I heard it was crazy." But you didn't actually say the word crazy in your original sentence. One special note about its usage is that imply can be a bit tricky because it's often confused with infer, which means to figure something out from the information given. So, while implying might suggest something, inferring requires us to actually think critically and come up with our own conclusions based on what we're told, but I'll get into more details about that another time if you're interested. When discussing complex ideas or nuances in communication, the word imply is particularly useful. In formal settings such as lectures or presentations, using imply can convey subtleties without explicitly stating them. For instance, a professor might say, "The author's decision to omit certain details from the historical account implies that they were intentionally trying to avoid controversy." Here, the context is an academic discussion of literary analysis, where the speaker wants to highlight the implicit meaning behind the author's choices. In casual conversations with friends or colleagues, using imply can add depth and interest to discussions. For example, a friend might say, "I think my sister implies that she doesn't want me to move away by always making snide comments about the place I'm moving to." In this context, the conversation is taking place over coffee with friends, and they're using imply to discuss their siblings' behavior in an informal setting. In business or academic writing, using imply can help convey complex ideas or consequences without directly stating them. For example, a company report might say, "The recent data suggests that our new product launch may imply increased market competition and potential financial risks." In this context, the discussion is taking place in a professional setting, where the writer wants to highlight potential implications of their findings without making explicit claims. So you want to know about imply? Well, let me explain. When we say that something implies something else, we mean that there's an idea or message that is suggested or hinted at, but not directly stated. The main characteristic of imply is that it's a kind of indirect suggestion, where one thing is connected to another in such a way that the second thing seems to follow naturally. It's like leaving a trail of clues, and if you put them together, you'll get the idea. In terms of similar concepts or synonyms, words like suggest, hint at, or imply itself are often used interchangeably with imply, although some people make a subtle distinction between them. For example, suggest might be more explicit in its suggestion, while hinted is even more indirect. When we use the word imply, what we're doing is drawing attention to the connections between ideas or situations, and suggesting that one thing follows naturally from another. Initial instance. Initial instance. Initial instance. The phrase initial instance is used to describe the first time something happens or occurs, especially in a particular situation or context. As an adjective phrase, it combines the words initial, meaning beginning or first, with instance, which refers to a single event or occurrence. In common usage, you might hear this phrase in discussions about digital technology, programming, or computer science, where it's used to describe the first time a particular process or algorithm is executed. For example, you might say, in our initial instance of testing, we encountered some minor bugs. It's worth noting that while this phrase is widely used in technical contexts, it may not be as commonly heard in everyday conversation outside of these fields. So language learners should be aware of its more specialized usage and potential limitations. In a formal setting, you might say, at the initial instance of the meeting, it was decided that the project timeline would be adjusted to accommodate unforeseen circumstances. This sentence uses initial instance to refer to the beginning of the meeting, where a decision was made. Contextually, this is likely in a professional or academic setting where decisions are being made and discussed among colleagues. In casual conversation, you might say, I'm going to order pizza for dinner tonight. That's my initial instance of getting takeout all week. Here, initial instance is used colloquially to mean the very first time something happens, which in this case is ordering takeout. This usage is likely among friends or family members discussing plans for dinner. In a business or academic context, you might say, further research was conducted after the initial instance of data collection to ensure accuracy and consistency. In this example, initial instance refers to the first time data was collected and serves as a point of reference for further analysis. This usage is likely in a report or presentation discussing research methods and results. So, you're trying to learn about that first time something happens or is created. That's what I'm here for. Think of it as when something starts. Like a process, an activity, or even a project. It's often referred to as the beginning point, where everything kicks off. In many contexts, this concept is also known by names such as beginning stage, first step, or launch point. What it does is set the tone for what follows, establishing a foundation that other events or actions can build upon. For example, in software development, it's often the first version of a program or app that gets released into the world, marking the beginning of its journey. Does that make sense? Interact. 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 So, let's break down the word interact. The part of speech is verb, which means it's an action that someone or something does. In common usage, interact typically means to communicate or have a relationship with someone or something in a mutual way. For example, people can interact on social media by sending messages and liking each other's posts. The key thing about interact is that it implies a two-way conversation or exchange. So if you're watching TV without participating or responding, it wouldn't be an interaction, but rather just observing. Another important note is that interact can also imply a physical presence. For instance, people can interact in a classroom or at a party by talking and engaging with each other. Overall, the word interact highlights the idea of mutual engagement and connection, making it a useful verb to know in everyday language. Here are 3 practical example sentences using the word interact with their respective contexts. In a formal setting, such as a job interview or a research presentation, you might say, as a team leader, I have been tasked to design an interactive platform that allows users to interact with our company's data and receive real-time feedback. This usage highlights the importance of interactivity in facilitating effective communication and collaboration. In this context, interact is used to convey a sense of mutual engagement between the user and the system. In casual conversation with friends or family, you might say, I love playing video games on my phone. It's so much fun to interact with the characters and explore new worlds. Here, interact is used in a relaxed tone to describe the immersive experience of gaming. The emphasis is on the user's ability to engage with the game's virtual environment and participate in its narrative. In a business or academic setting, such as a conference or a research paper, you might say, "Our study found that students who regularly interacted with their teachers through online forums performed better academically than those who did not." In this context, interact is used to highlight the positive impact of communication and collaboration on educational outcomes. The focus is on the dynamic exchange between individuals or groups, leading to a more informed and engaged community. So you want to know about interact? Well, when we talk about people or things working together and influencing each other in some way, that's basically what interact means. Main characteristics of this concept are that it involves two or more parties, like humans, systems, or even objects, that affect each other somehow. For example, if you're having a conversation with a friend, you're not just talking at them, but also listening to and responding to what they say. That's an interaction. Similar concepts or synonyms for this idea are things like communicate, collaborate, or even exchanged information. When it comes to how it's used, interacting is often about building relationships, resolving conflicts, or just sharing knowledge with each other. It's a pretty important part of life and work. If you think about it,